This is Tim Plaster from The Game of Thrones, and it appears as if you're listening to Derek Thomas and Monday Morning Critic Podcast.
He taught me, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
I said it before and I'll say it again. Life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
Good morning, Vietnam!
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
So you go on and stamp your form, Sonny, and stop wasting my time. Because to tell you the truth, I don't give a shit.
You don't know about real loss, because that only occurs when you love something more than you love yourself.
So if I'm not black enough, and if I'm not white enough, and if I'm not man enough, then tell me, Tony, what am I?
My name is Borat.
Hey, I never asked you. Yeah. You like guacamole?
You're the smartest guy I ever met, and you're too stupid to see. He made up his mind 10 minutes ago.
That's what I do. I drink, and I know things.
My next guest is an actor, writer, and a former NFL player, and he's been talented at all three. His name is Anthony Alabi. Anthony, thank you for being on the show today. How's life treating you?
It's going great, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I have notes all across my desk about your life, and I feel... Anthony, I always make the joke that, like, if anybody ever went to this much detail to know about somebody else's life, they'd either be a stalker or a podcast host. So I'm glad I'm the podcast host.
You went with the podcast.
Yeah,
at least that's what you tell people.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. So there's, I don't know where to start here. So as you're growing up, right, you grew up in San Antonio. Dad has this, like, love of movies and actors. Yep. Is that where you pick it up from?
Yeah, my dad is my parents are foreign, so my dad is Nigerian, my mother is Puerto Rican, and so my dad, a lot of times to connect to American culture, he watched movies, and so he would take us to the theaters on Sunday, and what would happen is we'd stay there basically from like 9 or 10 in the morning until like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night.
Wow.
And watch like 3 or 4 movies. And of course, I loved it because of the fact that, I wanted to be everything I saw. And I think one of the times we went, either he had enough of it or he was just like, let me let him in on this. But he was like, you know what? You can be all of those things if you're an actor. And I was like, what's that? And he explained it. And I lit up. And it was from that moment on, it was like all I wanted to do.
Is there a particular movie or actor, Anthony, that you see and you're like, you know what? That's the one, or this is the movie that has really ignited that flame in me to want it to go into a career in acting.
Yeah, honestly, there wasn't one significant thing. One memory I do have, and it's still one of the first times when I was kind of told what an actor was I remember watching this, and I'm sure now it's like this cheesy Lifetime movie as a kid of the Hank Gathers story. Do you remember Hank Gathers?
Yes, I do. Yeah, he Loyola Marymount, right?
That's right.
Yeah,
and that's the first time I heard of that school, and like he died of that heart condition.
Oh.
And I remember I cried so hard because I was like, wow, that guy's dead, and I just thought I was so scared, like not scared, but more just like I felt so bad that he was gone, and my parents were like, it's okay, like he's fine in real life. And I was like, what are you talking about? He just died. And that's and that was another instance where they were like, no, he was acting. And I was like, what? And my dad was like, remember I told you, actors? And like, look. And then he showed me a movie with that same actor and something else, and I was like, oh my God. And I think that for me, that has always kind of been burned into my head as being something like I want to do that. I want to move people like that.
Right, and it's almost like a Brian song, right? Where it's definitely acting, but it's portraying somebody that's very, very real. And
right,
yeah, that's a great. I never would have expected that. I mean, that's a powerful answer, man. That's a little more. That's a little more than acting. That's just really being moved by not only the person, but certainly your love of acting.
Yeah, and for me, I loved the idea that you can move someone and that you can kind of change people's perceptions and just the power that the art has. You know what I mean? And I fell in love with it right away.
So I have to say, I want to come back to acting, obviously, but I want to start off at the beginning. So I thought I read this. If I'm wrong, please correct me at any time. You attended the Naval Academy. Is that correct?
I did, yes.
Well, one, that is super hard to get into. I mean, it's one of the most difficult. It's on par with Harvard for those of you listening that don't know. It is. I mean, you have to get a letter from a representative or a congressman to get in. You have to be an
two ways to
impeccable
get in.
person. Yeah.
Yeah, there's two ways to get in. You can either be appointed or you can be kind of, I forgot the name of it, but recommended basically. So by a congressman, and then it's put to a vote. And, you know, it's a very difficult process. I was appointed, and you got to thank football for that. But yeah, they appointed me to the Naval Academy, and I ended up going for about a semester. I think I went and I loved it. And the worst thing about it was people were like, oh, you didn't like the military. I was like, I actually loved it. I'm super structured. I'm very type A. So I loved that part of it. For me, just kind of tying it into football, the thing that I just didn't agree with was just that, you know, at Navy, they're passionate about beating Army. And that was everything, you know, and I appreciated it and I love the pageantry of it. But it didn't feel like anything like the other games were as significant. You know what I mean? So if they went 1-12 and beat Army, it was a winning season. You know what I mean?
Right,
and for me,
right.
I just, you know, overall, it just didn't, the fit wasn't there. And so that's when I transferred and walked on at TCU.
Yeah, and that's a very complex situation at Navy. It's definitely an honor to go there and to be there. But yeah, I mean, you kind of want, from a sports perspective, bigger things, and TCU is certainly that, right? I mean, that is a hotbed for football. And,
yeah, I think when I got there, they had just kind of gotten to that point where they were getting national recognition as a top tier. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And then you get drafted by the Dolphins. You play for Nick Saban. Talk about him a little bit, Anthony. Was he tough to play for? I mean, you get the. It's very rigid at the Naval Academy, I would imagine. Not just the football, but life in general, right? I get the feeling that that's kind of Nick Saban, but just the football version of that.
Absolutely. Nick is. When he drafted me, you know, he's very straightforward, and he is a funny guy. That's the thing people don't realize. He's actually really funny, but he's very serious about football. He knows football. He's a genius at it, and he's not what you would call like a player's coach. And I know that the kind of the new movement, not new, but the movement for the past few years in the NFL or decade or so has been this player coach thing, which has worked out because I think when you get into the NFL, you deal with egos, you deal with guys that have bank accounts and kids. And I think you get to that point, you can't really throw a dictatorship at them. You know what I mean? So I think that Nick Saban, though he's an excellent coach and he's phenomenal at what he does, I think it was very tough for him kind of being in the NFL because you can't just kind of rule over everybody the way you do in college. You know, in college, those kids are looking to you to take them to the promised land. Now, whether that's a national championship or getting drafted, you can get them there, and you've been there. So they they hang on your every word. In the NFL, you can't necessarily do that because, you know, these guys are grown men. You know what I mean? And so I remember a story in particular where we had lost a game pretty badly, and Nick goes to the front of the room, and he goes, now, if you guys don't start doing what I tell you to do, I'm going to whoop you like I whoop my kids. And obviously he was kidding, but he was so upset that he let that out. And I remember Vonnie Holiday, who was our defensive tackle at the time, 6 foot, 6, had these long arms. Yeah. He was built like Superman. He stood up and he goes, "Hey, Nick, why don't you come and try and whoop me?" And I remember Nick Saban going, "All right, Vonnie, all right. What I'm saying is, the point is," you know. And so I think that's kind of the thing. But overall, he's a great guy. I always had a great relationship with him. He's very intense about football, which makes him so good at his job. But it was a different beast, I think, being in the NFL. And I think where he is now is the perfect place for him to be. I think they eat, breathe, and sleep football. And I think that's where he should be. Yeah,
and he's like an icon down there. I mean, he is
absolutely
just revered. Yeah. So I have to ask you because I do live in Massachusetts. I'm 45 minutes away from Gillette Stadium. So,
oh boy.
Okay, so you played for Miami. You're in the AFC East, right?
Yeah.
Just talk about. I mean, there just seems to be a universal hate for the Patriots. I mean, I get because they win, but for Tom Brady and Belichick.
Yeah.
What's your I mean, you have a unique experience where you can comment because you played against them. You've had the background. What's your take on that whole thing? Their dominance lately, and not lately, but for a long period of time. What's your take on that whole thing?
I have to start this answer with the fact that my wife is from Boston.
Oh, so, nice.
Yeah, so I have to hear from in-laws constantly. But that being said, we played them twice a year. I personally don't like New England, the Patriots, but not for the reasons that everybody else. I played against them, so in the era that I was playing, I didn't like the players that I played against just because and please don't confuse it with respect. I respect that team and I respect those players.
Sure.
I don't like the players that I played against because of the way they played and they did certain things. And that's just more inside baseball. It's like little things that are like, considered like, upstanding or norms in football that they broke just to kind of be jerks. You know what I mean? Like pushing a guy over a pile or being a prick about something. But other than that, the team itself, the reason why they get hated on is because they're so good.
Right.
And they're good because Belichick is honestly, that guy's a genius. And what he does and the system that they have in place, it's built on teamwork and it's built on the system, not the players.
Right.
And that's why when Tom Brady goes down, as wonderful and fantastic as he is, someone like a Jimmy Garoppolo or the other guy could jump in there and function. And that's for a reason, because that system works. Because what he does is the same thing Greg Popovich does in San Antonio with the Spurs. He plays to his players' strengths. He doesn't try and break the players to fit into his system.
And I'm glad you brought up Greg Popovich because that's exactly what it's like. You're right. It's all about the system. It's a plug and play, right? You get this guy, you put him in your system. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, that's a great point.
You can look at them through the years. No Super Bowl that they won has looked the same. I mean, if you look, they had the years where they had Aaron Hernandez and Gronk together, and nobody was running a 2 tight end system like that, and they did, and it was huge, and they dominated with that. So then everybody started doing it, and literally, I think like a year or two later, he was like, nope, and he abandoned it and went to like a 3 running back system. Like it depends on what he has, and that's what I think is the best thing about Belichick is his ability to adapt and say, okay, what do I have? I have all wide receivers. Cool. We'll do this and we'll do that. If I have all running backs, we'll do this. If I have more at this position, we'll do that. He doesn't mind. He's not obligated to anything. And I think that's what kind of makes it work for them is the fact that they're able to adapt so quickly. I mean, there was a game we played them and we had prepared all week for them to come out in this one defense. And literally we go out there, the first play of the game, they show that, and the rest of the game, they changed up the entire defense to something completely different.
Wow.
That no one knew about, that no one even so at halftime, we ended up having to revert our playbook back to like 2 weeks prior, and redo our entire offense at halftime because they just adjusted and they have that ability to kind of just flip you and you don't even know.
Yeah, and Tom Brady does not do well in Miami traditionally. That's not one of his strong points. So yeah.
No.
Yeah,
it's the heat.
Yeah, and I like your perspective because I mean it's an inside perspective, like you said, and it's a valid one. And what I always hate though is because Miami has a lot of history with their football team as well. And I'm not one of them. We have some obnoxious New England fans. I'm not one of them. But I hate every year we get grumpy old Don Shula comes out of the woodwork and says I hate this. I just wish they would shut up and appreciate. You know what I'm saying? Like it just sounds. I hate that hate because like there's reporters that do it. They say they win because of this. They win because of that. I don't know. I have a big issue with that.
And let me tell you something. You're not the only one. I mean, even when we were in Miami and playing Miami, the constant having to hear about the 72 Dolphins and the freaking undefeated season and them coming out and being like, "Oh, you guys are embarrassing us because you lost a game." And just being like, we were perfect. And it's like, okay, great. And I always said it. And I said it even when I played. I go, Miami won't win until they can let that go.
Right. No,
they won't win until they can let that whole thing go. And that's not a disrespect to Shula or any of those guys. It's just a thing of you have to move on. I understand the tradition. I understand everything else. But it's the same thing with New England. After Tom Brady's gone, now that Gronk is gone, after Belichick is long left, if you guys want to continue to win, you're going to have to let go of those teams that won all those Super Bowls and all that tradition. That has to go. What has to happen is you got to start all over again this year of what it is, what's going on, how your team is, and be honest and evaluate who you guys are.
Yeah, you know what I mean? That's so well said. I mean, and it's like that in acting too. You can't say, okay, I was in this movie. That did really well. You know what? You're on to the next project. You want to do the next thing really well. Yeah,
exactly.
Well said.
I think a lot of actors have a problem with that, and that's where football has helped me. It's this attitude and the mentality of what have you done for me lately? Oh, good. You had a summer blockbuster back in 2018. Great. It's 2019. What have you done this year?
Right.
And that I think is the thing that people have a lot of problems with because they have egos and they're like, no, I did this one awesome thing. Like you should love me forever. And it's like that's not how it works, man.
Yeah, that's well said. And people don't realize, Anthony, you've been on TV for years, right? So you go to a great preparatory high school. They prepare you for football. Obviously, you've done really well for yourself in that area, that arena. Somebody had to prepare you for acting, right? You can't just, because there's been a lot of great football players that have gone on to acting. Alex Karras, Jim Brown, Carl Weathers. Is there somebody that had to help you along the way? And not that you couldn't do it, but it's a tough field to be in.
It is. It's very tough. So when I left and I came out here, I didn't want to disrespect acting itself or the art itself by saying I was a professional in one thing, so I can obviously be a professional in this. Because for me, I think that's what a lot of people do, and I think that's a huge mistake. The second thing I did was made sure I didn't tell anyone that I played football. I didn't let anybody know. If they happen to know because they're a fan or whatever, I was like, oh, cool, yeah, whatever, and I downplayed it because the immediate perception is that, oh, you were a football player and now you're an actor. So obviously you miss the attention. You just want attention. You're not really into acting. You just miss people fawning over you or people being your fans or whatever it is. And I didn't want that. And so that's why I wouldn't say anything about that. Now, on to the training part. I remember I did like a monologue for a distant relative and that had been here in LA and was like a child actor. And so I basically did a monologue and I was like, look, just be honest with me. I'm not trained or anything like that. But if I do this monologue and you see just a sliver of anything that resembles an actor, then let me know and I'll pursue this to the fullest extent. If I'm trash and I'm just garbage at this and not good, let me know and I will be out. And I did the monologue and he was like, I think you could do it, man. And so I went on and I met a couple of friends and they introduced me to this guy named Josh Baton, who was my acting coach. And he had a 3-year program, a Meisner program, where they basically teach you how to act. They start you at the beginning and you just kind of go. And I kind of caught him in the perfect period of time when he was like at his like most New York strictest, you know what I mean? Like period. Right. And so it was like training camp for 3 years. You got beaten up, you got broken down, you got cursed at, you got, your chest beaten because it's learning how to really, really dive into it and to really kind of make yourself almost like director proof and kind of almost proof to everything around you. So that way, if you're working with someone and they're just not on that level, or you're working with someone and they're not taking it as serious, you're able to still do your job. And I think that's what helped me the most.
Yeah, and you go through too. The struggles with football. My God, that league is second to none as far as the beating you take and mentally what it does to you. You almost go through that all again, not so much the physical part, but the mental part going through acting. Like you mentioned 3 years. You've had you've kind of lived 2 lives here, Anthony, and I hate to make it sound over the top, but you have. There are people that live their whole lives wanting to be actors, and you've kind of had 2 lives here. Has that been tough on you? I'm not trying to bring out the world's smallest violin but has it been tough for you?
Yeah, my dad often jokes and he goes, "You just love impossible things." I was like, yeah, and I think it's just being ambitious. You know what I mean? It's been tough. There were many times where, I left football and I'm sitting in my 1-bedroom apartment in Hollywood at the time, like a year or 2 removed from the league. And I'm sitting there and I have like 1 or 2 co-stars under my belt where I say one line and I'm like a cop or something. And you look and you see friends that retired from the NFL and they're like with their beautiful wives and they have like twins and a nice new house. And you sit there and I'm just sitting here eating a sweet potato and a leg quarter of chicken and a glass of wine while watching Mad Men. And it's just like, what did I do? Did I ruin myself? Did I screw this up? Should I have stayed? And luckily I was surrounded by people who said, this is going to be lonely and you're going to be by yourself because not everybody is doing this. And so it became one of those things where you just have to learn and call back on that football training where you have to learn to kind of be mentally, imperceptible, where it's one of those things, nobody can really get into your mind. No one can really break you down. You have to have your eye on the prize. And then you look down and you take it one step at a time. No matter how long it takes, you just be as annoyingly ambitious as possible. And I think that's what helped. Knowing in the back of my mind, being convinced of the fact that this is never going to end. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to quit. And I'm just going to do it. And either the industry is going to see me and I'm going to work, or I'm going to die, and maybe at 72 I'll finally get a role. You know what I mean?
Right. No, and the one thing that I haven't mentioned yet that I probably should have a while ago is how supportive your father has been through this whole process, because I have actors on all the time, and believe me, the parents' reaction when they say they want to go into acting is not like your father's was. Like, you can do this. This is a dream you can achieve. Your dad's very supportive in that regard, Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because my dad, with his like Nigerian accent, I make fun of him all the time that he sounds like Mufasa. But he, I remember when I left the NFL, I came home with my best friend, and I sat there and I said, "Listen, Dad, I'm retiring from the NFL. I live in LA now, and I'm going to be an actor." And there was a pause, and he looked at me and he goes, "You live in LA?" And I go, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah." He goes, the retiring from the NFL, I'm just glad that you made it there. I mean, it's an accomplishment in and of itself to say that my son played in the NFL.
Sure.
And he goes, and you being an actor, he goes, that makes sense because you were always a ham as a kid and you just love, you loved acting. But LA, he goes, they have earthquakes. And I was like, Dad, okay, yeah, I know. And so, but yeah, he's always been supportive. And I think he's just supportive because I think he knows all in all that no matter what I do, I'm never going to half-ass anything.
Right.
And even if I'm not into it, or if I'm doing something, you will always get everything I got. And I think that's the thing that my dad knew, that no matter what, that I was going to do something with this because I was determined to.
Yeah, and just for those of you listening, some of Anthony's filmography includes NCIS, Longmire, Raven's Home, Bosch, Modern Family, and you hit the home run with Family Reunion so far.
Yeah.
So you've done really well for yourself.
Thank you.
So is there a role that? So I get you're building your filmography, and you've done really well doing that in a very short amount of time. Is there
Thanks.
a role that you really want, Anthony? Is there a role that, I mean, as an actor, I get it. Anything that comes out that you really kind of feel you can do, you'd want it. I get it.
Yeah.
But is there something particular that you're like, you know what? Like you were moved by the Gather story, right? Is there something like, I don't know, biopic or something like that you're really interested in?
Well, in all honesty, I mean, I love comedy. It's something that I instinctively kind of just get, and I've always gotten since I was a kid. I just love turning the world kind of upside down and making fun of it. But dramatic acting is kind of my thing that I've loved since the beginning. And it's because I feel like after being through so much trauma, like even as a kid and my mom dying of breast cancer and, just all the things that you go through, like I talked about, in just becoming a football player and all the things you go through in becoming an actor and just kind of finding yourself and dating and relationships and people and whatever, you build kind of this reservoir of emotions and stuff that you can call on. And I think that anytime I get a dramatic role, it helps and I love it because it's a way of kind of getting that out and kind of being able to express yourself fully in that moment. And so for me, I have always wanted a very deep dramatic role, and I've gotten to kind of do some drama. I'm on Shameless now, so I've been gotten to play with that a little bit, but just that, I've always wanted to be like Sherlock Holmes, for instance, it's my thing. I love Sherlock Holmes, like that story and all the adventures to the ends of the earth. So to be able to play like a black Sherlock Holmes would be the greatest thing ever.
Very cool. Yes, I agree.
Or like, I agree. Basically like Idris Elba in Luther, like just being that character and getting to kind of dive into that because it plays into what I majored in college, which was criminal justice and kind of getting into serial killers and that kind of thing. The psychological kind of dramatic thing I'm really into. I love that stuff.
Yeah, and I think you'd be really good at it. And you mentioned Shameless, and I was going to bring that up. You've already been signed on for season 10. Am I right with that?
Yes.
And you signed on with another very talented, very funny actor. People know her as Debbie Downer. Rachel Dratch, who's a great actor. So that's a step in a direction I think you're hinting at, like you mentioned. And that's a really good thing, Anthony. I mean, you're on the road that many actors can't even get close to at this point.
I've been very fortunate, like I said, and luckily, early on I had a team put together that looked at things differently. I think a lot of times they see like, oh, you're a big black guy, let's a bouncer and a cop and a thug or whatever you want me to be. And I think early on, my manager and I made the decision that like we're going to be different. Because I remember going to that first audition room and looking around and seeing like 14 other guys that looked just like me. And I remember my immediate thought when I left that was like, I can't do that. I'm not going to do this for 20, 30, 40 years, just sitting in this room with other guys that look just like me and competing for this one role that comes out. I was like, I need to do something different, and I need to figure out a way that I'm different from them. And the way I figured it out was you need a big guy who does what other big guys don't do. And that means being extraordinarily vulnerable when it comes to dramas and allowing yourself to be hurt and wounded and affected, and being able to show that to the audience and relay that kind of what's going on. And then comedically to have better timing and to be funnier and just off the cuff, like way more hilarious than any of those people. And I think that's what I kind of just like put my head down and focused on and trained in and made sure I was ready for. So that way, when we did go to audition for stuff, yeah, most of the time they'll be like, no, thanks, we appreciate it. But, you know, when you go into a room and it's 15 Jewish guys that are like under 5 feet and they're like, are you here for the same role? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, okay. And then you go into casting and they look at you and they go, you know what? It would be funny if he played like the wimpy nerd. You know what I mean? Right. And I think when we started doing that, it started to kind of change people's minds as far as with producers and casting and directors. And they were like, yeah, we can cast him in anything.
Yeah, and I love that I think, and you've hinted at this and said it basically, I think your sense of humor plays a huge part in it because you clearly have a very good sense of humor. My sense of humor is very dry, so sometimes I'm sarcastic in interviews, and then there's followed by 10 seconds of silence because people don't know what the hell I'm trying to say. So I'm glad someone can appreciate. But you know what? You have that, and I think that's part of what sets you apart, right? Your work ethic is involved in that. There's other things. But, I totally agree with that. And is there a time that you're ever exhausted from that grind, Anthony, where you're like, Jesus Christ, this is tough. This is kind of tough for me here.
It's one of those things that, but it's a champagne problem, right? And that's what I always kind of look at, where it's one of those things that, like, even now, you know, with our family, I have 2 babies at home. My wife and I are like constantly going. She's corporate and you know, also a Pilates trainer on the side, and does like, you know, we're both like constantly going. We're constantly moving. We have tons of stuff on our plate. I live by my Google Calendar. So with all that going on, there's times where we're just like, this is crazy. And we look at each other at the end of the night and we're like, did you eat today? And it's like, no, did you? No. And it's like, oh crap. All right. Well, you know, like you forget to eat or you're just running. But at the end of the day, I think both of us are just like, this is the best life. And this is awesome. And you never know how long you're going to be blessed with this. And you never know, you know, what's going to come around the corner. And I think that's exciting. And I think it's what we wanted. So we never kind of look at it as a burden. It's always one of those things that's like, okay, what's next? All right, what do we got? All right, let's make room. Let's do this. Let's hustle. Because I think we made a choice early on that we were just going to hustle and we were just going to go and we were going to keep going until it stopped. And for me, I told my manager, I was like, listen, man, I will never be okay and satisfied. Like, we need to just keep going. Right. And so, you know, and because I love it. And I think when you love something, it's not work. You know, the work is the auditioning and the running around town, the changing in your car and going into a Starbucks bathroom and changing and, you know, all that. That's the work. The vacation is being on set and getting to just focus on acting.
Yeah, that's well said. And I have to say, I was reading one of your interviews and I was kind of moved by something your wife said, right? So you're talking about how you finally got your big role, which turned out to be Family Reunion, and you're shaking, right? And you've pulled over to the side of the road. And I mean, it's kind of been, you've been hit. I mean, it's a good kind of thing, right? Because you get your first role, but then your wife eventually looks to you and it's like something out of a movie. And she goes, was it worth it? I thought just that's so powerful. Yeah. You know, that's a really, think about that. Like, it's not just a quote, right? That's that's reflective of all the work you've busted your ass for. Yeah. I don't know. I love what your wife said there. Like, that really moved me that she said that. That's a pretty amazing thing.
I think at the end of the day, and we have she's my soulmate. I mean, there's no one else for me. She is literally my soulmate. Like, we are partners in everything. And I think at the end of the day, when all was said and done, and she was like, congratulations, you finally broke this seal on this level that you were really trying to get to. And I think at the end of the day, she just cares about me. and she wants to make sure that I'm okay and that I got what I wanted. And I think even though like all this was going on and it was like the biggest thing ever and it was amazing, at the end of the day, she wanted to check in and just be like, hey, was it everything you wanted it to be? Or is this disappointing? And is it not exactly what you hoped? Because she knows me and she knows that I have no ego, so I have no problem pivoting. If I got to this level and it ends up that I hate acting and I don't like it, I will pivot in 2 seconds and move on to something else and go be a photographer or go be a detective or go whatever. Because that's just the way I am. If there's a better way of doing something and a better version of it, then I will go for that. Whether I'm part of it or not, it's just about the end game and the product.
And
you know what I mean?
And whatever you do, man, you're going to do it first class because that's just ingrained in you. That's just how it works.
Right.
I have to say, I never include myself in interviews, but I was also a criminal justice major. And your wife being from Boston will know the school. It's Northeastern University. So
that's where she went.
Really? Small world?
My wife went to Northeastern.
Yeah, small world.
The Huskies.
Yeah, Reggie Lewis was an alum there. Sean Jones, former linebacker. Yeah, so good.
I see you guys showing out. I see you.
See, I felt that connection with you. See, great people say great things, so your wife knows what she's doing. Yeah. So I have a few
Except
more.
you guys don't say Worcester right. It's Worcester, but you say Worcester. So sure.
That's right. That's right. And does your wife have the Boston accent? Does she have or is it kind of?
It's funny because she's corporate, like she got rid of it. But it's funny that either when she's drinking or when we are back in Boston, it comes back.
Right.
And she's like, yeah. So I went to St. Bernard's, and I'm like, it's St. Bernard's, and she goes, no, it's St. Bernard's, and I go, what's the name of what's the breed of the dog that's in Beethoven? And she goes, it's St. Bernard, and I go, see, you're capable. You're capable of saying Bernard.
Your wife sounds wicked smart. I got to say though, she's wicked smart. So
yeah, she's wicked smart.
Good stuff. And I have a few more questions for you, Anthony, if you don't mind.
No problem.
So I have to say, one of your big things is in the dynamic of much of your works thus far, because there's much to go. I know that are families, man. You're in a lot of family shows. And it's amazing how much family shows have changed from the 70s and 80s. I mean, you and I are roughly the same age, so we can name a ton of great family shows in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. But in 2019, man, that's a different dynamic entirely, right? Things are now more acceptable now, are looked at differently, which is a good thing. So, is that ever a challenge for you? Do you take note of that? Do writers take note of that? What's your take?
I think the writers naturally have to be on the pulse of that stuff. Just because it's their work, they're building worlds, and I think they have to be kind of on ear to the ground and make sure that they're current in everything they're doing. For me, it's those things where it's funny about how things have changed, where it's like stuff that you talked about back then you can't talk about now, and vice versa. Stuff that was kind of like taboo and you don't touch back then, it's completely open and fine now. Mm-hmm. So for me, I just enjoy kind of living in that. I enjoy kind of like playing with it and just kind of being in those moments that are different from when we were younger, and going back and watching those shows and being like, wow, and listening to the jokes and being like, holy cow, you cannot say that now. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, I mean, my wife and I were like rewatching Entourage the other day, and just like Ari's dialogue alone, we were like, Jesus, he could never say that with the Me Too movement coming on now. Like, there's no way you could ever get away with any of this. But yeah, I mean, for me, it doesn't, I kind of just, the words, you kind of go with the words, and you go with what they write and the world that they build. So for me, I just enjoy it. I just kind of enjoy being in that world and kind of playing with those things, and the new way that people are delivering kind of themes and messages through television.
Yeah, and I got to say, along what you just mentioned, is that PG in the 70s and 80s would be like maybe an R or a PG-13 now. I mean,
exactly.
Some of the stuff is like, wow.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's interesting how back then the stuff that went on or the stuff they talked about is just so. I mean, if you look at what's the is it All in the Family, the Archie Bunker?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like the stuff he talked about and the stuff he said just on network television would absolutely not fly today. You know what I mean?
No way.
So it's interesting to see that. And that's a guy who it would be fun to see him kind of play now in a family show, which is kind of what they did with Ed O'Neill in Modern Family, right?
Right.
They take this guy who was married with children back in the day was able to kind of say whatever he wanted. I mean, his favorite TV show was Psycho Dad, where it's like killed his wife because she weighed a ton, like all that stuff. It's like, you cannot say that now. And so now you look at Modern Family, and it's funny when he says things that are slightly racist or slightly like sexist or slightly whatever, because he's just not from that era. You know what I mean? Right. And it's funny that you mentioned Archie Bunker, because I think it was, and I hope I'm right with this, there's an episode where Sammy Davis Jr., I think, plays or was it George... Was it Sherman Hemsley? I can't remember. They're both in the episode, but I can't remember. I think it was Sherman Hemsley, yeah. That's something like that, yeah. And the look on his face, like the complete racist look on his face, and what he says to him, like, never fly today. Absolutely never. I mean, never. He could not have made it more... Even if you look at old SNL, like old SNL with Richard Pryor or Eddie Murphy, I mean, the stuff that they would say to each other, you were like, what is happening? You're so right, man. You're so right with that. Man. Yeah, and it's amazing because TV has progressed, and it's a good way, man, because you look at, say, a movie like Black Panther, right? So you have kids now looking at roles that... what they see somebody on screen that's not, you mentioned your auditions earlier where you said there's, now it's like, okay, let's think outside the box here. Let's put somebody up there that isn't in the stereotypical this role again or that role again. Now we have ourselves somebody that all kids can appreciate. Exactly. And I think that's where it's going, is this point where you have even little white kids that are like living in suburbia and they're wearing Black Panther masks. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Yep. And I think that dynamic has changed, and for the better. I mean, I remember a buddy of mine telling me his daughters at the time, and this was like 3 years ago, his daughters at the time were about 8 years old. And I remember Obama was on television, and she kind of tugged on her dad's shirt, and she looked up at him and she goes, "Hey, Dad, can white people be president?" Because if you think about it, 8 years, that's all they've known. That's right. So for them, they were like, this is President Obama. That's the president. Right. And so she was like, can people that look like me be president? And it's like, she has no idea. It's all you. Yes. That's what it's been. Yes. And so, but I think that's a kind of a sign of things changing and a sign of how the perspectives have changed over time. Now, not these past 2-3 years since we're back in the 50s, but you know what I mean. Right. And I got to tell you though, and I'm happy to say this because usually you hear people say it's not like it was in the good old days. I'm going to tell you right now, television has never been better. Ever. Yeah, I think this is the golden era of TV, personally. Absolutely. I really do. And people will ask and be like, hey, are you interested in movies? And I'm like, of course you are. But honestly, to be part of television right now is such an exciting, awesome thing. There's nothing better. And there's so many ways, so now you have Hulu, you have Netflix, you have Prime. Amazon. Apple. You have a ton of things that now you can take your craft and there's more opportunity to develop a great show or a great, TV movie, whatever. But it exists today where it wasn't like this even 10 years ago. No. Now there is so much content. I mean, I think AT&T has originals now. Spectrum has originals now. And there's so many outlets and so much content out there that if you are into, dogs, there's a dog show out there. If you're into anything, I mean, if you're a gymnast, there's a gymnast TV show somewhere out there. There's just enough content for everybody to kind of get their piece of the pie. And what they want to see or how they want to be entertained. And I think that's what makes this such a great time. I mean, you look at people who are A-list, actors who are, movie stars, and they will come down to TV because they love it. And they think that, and just the way it's done, HBO and Showtime and all those premium channels, what they're doing, and Netflix and what they're doing, and the movies that they're making and the content they're creating, it's incredible. And so I think that's why people now are like, nope, I'm doing TV, man. Right. And I used to hear people say, a while ago, they say, there's nothing on TV. Well, if you're saying that today, you're either lazy or you're miserable or both, right? Because there's you're lazy, miserable, or you don't want to pay the $12.99 a month. That's well said, man. Hey, before I let you go, is there anything, Anthony, that you wanted to get out there? Future projects? Anything? Naturally, Family Reunion Part 2 is going to drop at the end of the year. That's the second half of Season 1. And then I'm going to be on Shameless soon, Season 10. And, hit me up on Instagram or Twitter. I'm always on. I try to be as much as I can. And I try to respond to fans when they message or kind of comment. But other than that, I hope everybody enjoys the show. I hope people keep watching, and I have a bunch of projects and stuff that are in the works, so hopefully I can talk about them soon.
Yeah, man, I got to say, without sounding cheesy, you've had people cheering for you your whole life, whether it's on the field or as an actor, man. You just made a new fan today, and I can't
man, I really appreciate it.
I can't thank you for coming on the show today. Thanks so much, man. Love and success down the road.
Thanks a lot, brother. You too, man. I appreciate everything. Thank you so much.